We've now seen Vladimir Putin sent the message to the world yesterday, and then sent in what he's calling, quote, peacekeeping troops into two different regions of Ukraine. The White House went from calling it an incursion into an invasion.
Ukraine is not just a neighboring country to us. It is an inherent part of our own history, culture, spiritual space. They are our comrades, relatives, not only colleagues, friends, but also our family, people we have blood and family ties with.
With this move, the question will be whether this is the final move, or is this just the staging ground to go further in and actually get Kyiv?
No one has said that there's still not yet some time before we see like a full-scale war. This part of this region is not that. It's the Donetsk region, Luhansk region. So this has been a war zone for a decade.
Yep.
In no man's land. There's been sniping back and forth for a decade. But significant that Russia has moved in its own troops, not just relying on the separatists, into these regions, and that he's already declared them independent from Ukraine.
These are ground troops in armored personnel carriers and Soviet or Russian tanks. This is not a peacekeeping force. What makes it so alarming, I believe that Vladimir Putin, he intends on taking all of Ukraine. I truly believe that. But part of the reason I believe that, one, is listening to his speech the other night. Very aggressive. He actually denied that Ukraine exists as a separate country. But the other thing is this, Jay. There are 190,000 troops poised to invade Ukraine. I'll give you a comparison. When we invaded Iraq, with all the shock and awe that preceded that, we had 170,000 troops. He has more than that on the border with Ukraine. And what U.S. intel has also revealed is of those 190,000 troops, over half of them have moved out of what we call administrative assembly areas to what is called in the military tactical assembly areas. They have moved forward in a tactical position, some of them in fighting positions.
International law, Andy, recognizes the borders of Ukraine. The Minsk Agreement in 1994 recognizes the borders of Ukraine, and Russia signed on to that. There's a violation of international law here.
Putin has violated those inviolable borders by what he was doing was fomenting revolution in Luhansk and in Donetsk, and then coming in with the Hitler-type thing of we're going to send protective forces in there to make sure that the rights of these countries are protected.
Vladimir Putin has always been someone who does what he says he's going to do, or at least gives his level best to do so. They break promises, contracts, they break nuclear agreements, but Vladimir Putin has made clear that the dissolution, the dissolving of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of this last century, and he wants to rectify it. We should take him at his word.
By placing, quote, peacekeeping troops in these two regions of Ukraine, how significant do you view that move by Putin as it came literally on the heels of his speech?
It is very significant. Obviously, it was well planned. He's prepared for this. Those troops are moving in from the east, from Russia. They've not moved in from Belarus at this point. We pray that they never do and head towards Kyiv. It's a very significant moment for them to be able to literally cross the border. The Russians have been there. Russian troops have been there, but they've always just called them separatists. Now the Russians are moving into those areas, declaring them as independent states, and then saying that those states have also invited them to set up military enclaves.
The difficulty with all of this is he laid out a very nationalistic and expansive view of how he sees Russia now and how Russia was historically.
The modern Ukraine was completely created by Russia. To be more exact, by Bolshevik communist Russia. This process has started almost immediately after the 1917 revolution.
What he was setting was a prelude for his own people for saying this Ukraine was never anything but part of the homeland of Russia from the 10th century when the Rus became Christians. Where did that Christianization take place, Jay? It took place in the caves around Kiev. That was the historical Rusland. And what he was saying and laying out to his people in that rambling 3-hour speech was, forget what the Bolsheviks did, forget what Lenin did, and forget what Stalin did. We are going back to what Russia was in the great old days of the Tsarist regimes.
It's not that he's necessarily wrong, and for a lot of Ukraine that does have those ties to Russia, just like a country like Belarus would have those ties to Russia. The difference is they made a deal because they wanted to be separate from Russia in 1994, that they would get rid of their nuclear weapons, which if they still had would have prevented any kind of incursion like this by Putin. but they would get rid of those so long as they were Russia acknowledged their sovereignty into the future. And so that agreement was right after the fall of the Soviet Union. But you see Putin throughout the speech was saying this, Lenin was wrong, Stalin was wrong, Khrushchev was wrong in the
Bolsheviks
60s,
were wrong.
Post-World War II efforts were wrong. Right, that they were just wrong to ever create this name Ukraine, basically.